Hello and welcome to the fourth lecture in the Design Forum series. My name is Chris Flocka. I was one of the four people who helped to organize the lectures. I hope that some of you have had the chance to hear David Hockney, who talked about his filmmaking, Bart Prince, who explained some of his architectural ideas, and Betty Edwards a couple of weeks ago, who amazingly enough kept 300 people here for more than 3 hours and didn't lose a crowd. As she talked about how drawings help to solve problems and explain creativity. And tonight, Robert Mangurian, who's the director of the graduate program, will introduce Lars Lerup, who's speaking.
Lars, being a good Swede, has a certain amount of alcoholic beverage up here. Very pleased to introduce Mr. Lerup to you. He comes to us by way of Sweden, which I think he pretty much completed his early education, then through New York, and tangled with, I think first as a student. Do I have this right now? I make it up. With Peter Eisenman, and later as a co-teacher with him, and hopefully in the future as a teacher of Mr. Eisenman. He's a person that I would have said is the kind of person that I very much did not believe in until maybe recently, and as you'll see tonight, I hope. A person that refrains from touching it for all too long, and then does a lot of careful thinking, experimental thinking, and through his mind and his hands, and then plunges forward, I think, to make some extraordinary projects in architecture. That remains to be seen completely, but I think you'll see tonight those projects. And he also, I guess, is one of those people, I probably share this, who loves to hate architecture, and is somewhat aloof from architecture, at the same time being so totally immersed in it that he's its greatest fan. Lars Lerup.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be at SCI-Arc. As you know, I'm an old fan that have been here a lot, and I'm a friend. I would like to tell you something about what I do, honestly, tonight, which is not always so easy because it's a bit scary. But I'll try to do that. Because one of the things that occurs to you the longer you operate in this world, and particularly around architecture, that staying the course, believing and working with that which you believe in is the ultimate reward. And it's not so much what people think about you, although that is nice to be liked. It is ultimately what you think that the pursuit is about. So first I'd like to say that architecture is dead, and turn on the slides. And it died. Well, I think we can get rid of this because they killed the slides for all this technology. Huh? Can we lower those? Because we can't see the slides. Eccola. It died right here, actually. Being a die-hard modernist, pun intended, the Architectural Promenade that... hey, you promised me not to be tangled up. I'm already tangled up. Do your work. The Architectural Promenade, which actually
La morte dell'architettura, finalmente.
The Architectural Promenade, which actually is the driving force in modernist architecture, the notion of a moving subject vis-à-vis a stable object, and thereby dreaming of an object that actually moves. Because it is this dream that lies underneath all modernist architecture, is to make all that hard stuff move. It is culminating in this dream of Corbusier, of the moving subject, up the stair, through the building, up to this top of the building, in which the culmination of the modernist dream would appear, the future, the hope. Next. The subject, as we know him in Corbusier, the shorts, the muscles, the low brow, the punching ball, blah, blah, blah. Usually there's a woman up there with a blanket looking with some kind of skepticism at this idiot pounding at the ball. And these kind of ultimate devices of the Architectural Promenade, that you climb to the sky, or this one, all of them leading up there. The figure leading you, taking you up to the top of the building, the dream of the future, the hope of the future, represented in the roof gone forever, opening the sky, opening everything that we had lost in the past. Next. And the subject inscribed in the building, the sinuous curve of the body in the hook house. And all the technologies here drawn by my own hand, all of them technologies that lead, technologies of the Architectural Promenade, all out of Corbusier, leading to this point of absolute bliss, the terrace. Next. Because what we did, we, the modernists, we pulled the building out of the ground, got rid of the basement, that kind of priarchic, useless space for all the memories, and freed it for the ground, and lifted ourselves up out of it, took off the roof, and opened up to the sky. In this, we had cut our relationship with the past, and opened the space to the future. As we know, the modernist dream never came through. It didn't solve any social problems. It accumulated maybe social problems. All of this hope actually went out the window. And we were left, therefore, in a sense, with a little death of architecture. Because architecture lived on this hope of actually changing people's lives, of making it better, of improving it. And it failed. And we are therefore left with this legacy of a failed possibility of architecture. And what can we do with this situation? With this death, with this carcass? Can we revive it? Do we want to? Of course we want to. How do we revive it? I don't know if I know. I'll tell you how I have revived it for myself. Successfully, who knows? Not very. But nevertheless, I've tried. Next. The ultimate dream of the Architectural Promenade was this project in Alger, where there was finally a technology that solved all urban problems and connected all those little kasbahs with one simple gesture. Architecture solving all problems. This was the ultimate dream of Corbusier. Manfredi Tafuri in Architecture and Utopia has written about it beautifully, elegantly. The reality, Pessac, Corbusier, and the peasants of Pessac.
A little roof, a little basement, you did a little blah, 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 you know, the whole stuff. Huh? The failure. We don't want that crap. We want a house. We want tranquility. The hope of architecture here, you know, everybody has to, even the Moorish ones get their space, you know. That was the ultimate, you know, gesture of Corbusier. In this structure, I even let people design their own thing. That was the ultimate belief of the architect, and architecture as a solution to problems. That was never built. Never built. Next. There were other ways that actually inspired me more, or as much as Corbusier. One of them is this marvelous device that those of you who know me know is one of my pet projects. This is one of my pets. Normally, now it's the test of the chord here. It occurs right here. I come out from here. I'm coming home, take my hat, put it on a coat hook, sit down, watch TV. It's domestic, it's wonderful. It's a coat hanger. Duchamp put it on the floor because he came from Paris, he had many things to do. He didn't have time to nail it up. He didn't have a hammer, he didn't have nails, whatever. And he stumbled, and so did his friend. He called it the trebuchet, the trap. What happened then? Those friendly hooks on the wall became fangs, ready to capture your foot, to destroy you, to break your leg. And suddenly language was stripped off the object, and the object in its own form was revealed to us for the first time. We thereby realized the power of language to hold objects, to hold their meaning, to force it to be something when it ain't. Because this is both friendly hooks and dangerous hooks. That possibility lies in architecture. That it's not so friendly, but it's also dangerous. It is form without meaning. It's stripped bare. It's dangerous. That hope of architecture having its own form, its own meaning, lies beyond the death of architecture. That it is an internal possibility that can bring architecture into another realm. And I don't know where it is. I hope for it. I dream for it. This is another world I like very much. This is below the Acropolises. This is the sort of the dilemma of the anthropologist and the archaeologist. Those are the pieces they don't know what to do with. And they're lined up, you know, endless rows of them. It's like the, you know, it's like the back room. All the best pieces are up there. And all these are all the worst pieces, they don't fit. Those are the ones that have been fragmented to a point when they have no meaning for the whole. Those are liberated from the whole. They're liberated from language because they don't mean anything anymore. They cannot be put together in the great classical system to make a temple. They're fragments that can never be resuscitated. You can never breathe life in these things. They're dead. And there's a possibility in this deadness that goes beyond meaning, that goes beyond commerce. You can't buy them, you can't sell them because nobody wants them. You can't make a cute ark in some nice, Beverly Hills mansion. No, you can't because they're broken. Broken forever. And it's that brokenness, that crack, that, it's like the vessel that holds no water anymore. The uselessness. That is the attack on this society, on the hope for this society of making everything commercial, everything sellable. In this lies a real hope of our resurrection in a way, of our possibility of a bliss with architecture that has no commercial value, only subliminal, experiential, Hey, have some wine, boy. You're getting too hot. I could have been a Southern preacher, I think. I just feel it. But I mean it. Next. The project I'm talking about tonight, that I've worked with my troupe of dedicated madmen, Mike Bell, Tony Lau, Mike Palmore, Bill Green, Mina Chow, Jesse Taylor, is about a hope for a particular place, namely Berlin. Anybody that comes from an outside and encounters Berlin encounters this wall, and it's stunning. You know, what a fantastic, it must be a bureaucratic blunder. What is it? And the Berliners, they say, oh, come on, don't talk to me about the wall. I have things to do. You know, I need to get out of here anyhow. The wall, though, is universal, because there are walls in every city. Visibly like this, or invisible, between rich and poor, between weak and strong, between homeless and homeful, whatever you call them. And we wanted to kind of celebrate this particular wall, this particular situation between two worlds, the East and West, and make a project that would allow us as architects to free ourselves from the bondage of the past, to free ourselves from plans, from the pressure of those ruins completed, to a fragmentation, to a freedom that meant something to us. It was not a solution. It was pure experience for us. It wasn't, you know, we weren't going to take on this humongous problem between East and West. No, it didn't have anything to do with that. This had to do with a kind of contraband activity, of a sabotage, of a way of saying, you know, you, and this is what we want to do. This had no reality, no hope that it will ever be built. This had to do with our feeling about walls, about space, about possibility. So we were liberated, in a sense, from the burden from the past. This is a very peculiar wall, by the way, as we will see next. It is a wall that looks rather charming here with a little graffiti on it, but it's a sinister technology. Sinister indeed. You see this bulge up here. It's a complete circle with a wall on it. So if you come from the other side, and many did, many tried, you run and you want to get over the wall, you slip off because you can't get a grip. This wall is a representation in architecture. That's where architecture can be powerful. It is a representation of this division between East and West, formidably described in technology. So for us, this is the world that we play with, technology, architecture. That's where we had to attack. That's where we had to do our sabotage. Next. Peculiarly, we saw very early that the walls were actually two, one of East and one of West, like two hands held together with this wonderful microphonic bulge on the top. And we felt, just like lobotomy in some evil person, that if we split it right down the middle, I almost hit my head here, and parted them, that sinister technology was somehow destroyed, incapacitated. So we had in this, the West Berlin, and in the middle, instead of this no man's land, we had a yeah man's land, and every man's land, and no man's land. In that parting, in that inside of that wall, if we just parted them far enough to fit some people, It never existed. Because the wall consists of the wall and 100 meters of, mined, whatever, horrible piece of land that if you run across it, you will have great trouble. So it was this wall-will space, of a will to space, of making space inside something. And not space outside, making inside space, of parting it. That promised this possibility of a respite, of a lull in this great texture of cities. Next. An episode, a discontinuity, parenthesis, suspended, stoppage, standstill, pause, rest, break in intermission, respite, abeyance, lull, lapse, kangaroo closure, clôture, halt, pause, hesitate, arrest, recess, break off, bring it to a stand, cut the gun, turn off the juice, mix, transformation, transmogrification, metastasis, mutation, transfiguration. All of those things in this void, a table, a play for time, a parenthesis, a caesura, a possibility of silence in this great. Ultimately, if you go to East Berlin, it looks the same. It's not as much fluff. It's the same kind of grid. There's another one on the other side. I mean, it's basically the same. A little more fluff here, a little more Mercedeses. So we wanted to create a new space in between that had nothing to do with either, that was liberated from it, freed from it. I don't think we succeeded, because you can't liberate yourself from the past. The modernists taught us that. But nevertheless, we tried. Next. We developed two actors, Frank Chance and Lady Luck. Frank Chance, Albert Speer, that was his way. Or here in Los Angeles, in Germany it's called Hans Glück, putting in, he was the guy that split the wall, take them apart, held the walls apart, made this wide opening, filled by these guys, for example. These were the early Germans that then became the Nazis. Look at their gaze. Look at their hope. Look at their marching, almost military, looking at something beyond us. Next. I couldn't find a bowling shot, so I found some wrestling shots. We wanted to bring in this person, this kind of crude, look at his mustache, his scream. Look at this, foot in the face kind of thing. We wanted to bring in this character into this game of bourgeoisie, of tripping, walking down the road, just all fancy and lovely, huh? To bring this guy in, it's like, whoa! That was Frank Chance, Hans Glück. He wanted to come in and make all that, change all that stuff. And of course he had a partner, a Mrs. Lady Luck. She was there too. Next. So Lady Luck, when Frank Chance had parted his hands to make his wall, this opening, this no man's land, Lady Luck came, bowling style, and threw a whole bunch of architectural ideas into this space. Everything, as Corbusier said, is spheres and cylinders. Well, not quite. We developed a few others. The cards, the pinwheel, the zigzag, the bars, the Möbius strip. What do we call this? Forgot. We'll get to it. All of these things started as geometry, as pieces, as kind of, what do they call it in Japanese? Origami. They were thrown in. In other words, we believed strongly in this throwing. It had something to do with something you could keep in your hand. When Lady Luck took these ideas, she could hold them, and it was particularly potent in the case of the zigzag. The zigzag was a tight packet in her hand, and when she threw it out, it just bounced out like this and became structural and held itself. And so did the pinwheel. the cards differently, the bars in another way. All of these pieces became just like that, but they were not complete, they were not hermetic, they were open, they were springy, they were full of energy, and there's this kind of ballistic energy that allowed us to do the work eventually. Next. So the throwing hand of Lady Luck, although it looks like a male hand, it nevertheless is a female hand, throwing them. Wedges, zigzags, cards, pinwheels, bars, Möbius strips. And maybe here it's where it becomes a bit pedestrian and pedantic. And that's because I'm an engineer, ultimately. We had to take each of these and bring them to architecture. Bring them from the oblivion of geometry into architectural space. And ultimately then, it had to do with social things. It had to do with social activity, with a program, with a notion of life. Because without it, there is no architecture. You cannot have architecture without life. You cannot have architecture without habitation. Otherwise, it is lost to some other art. They're fine by themselves. But architecture cannot live without the social intention. They cannot live with the concept of the relationship between the object and the subject. This beautiful canopy, like a holding its very nice kind of Jewish hat on my blonde head, over my head here, gives me a feeling of importance. Of, it's crazy, all these cables and all that razzmatazz, but it does something to me. It defines me, helps me to be who I am. Actually, probably gives this lecture. That is terribly important. Next. There are lots of places in cities, former walls, like the Ringstrasse in Vienna. This is for Wolf, by the way. Or some other great boulevard here filled of militaries that actually were clearings in the city that later became occupied by architectural activity. So there is, of course, this is not a completely new idea. Next. Let's start with the wedges. The wedges, since we have split the wall, taken it apart, we have removed one part of the bulge. We can now escape inside, but we can't escape outside in this no man's land. So that becomes important, therefore, to create the potential of escaping back into east or west. So we developed the wedges, and they started as ramps, stairs, ladders. It's in a sense the way we feel that we can resurrect architecture is to go back to one of the basic qualities of architecture. It's quality of allowing you to race from one level to another, to be either inside or outside, to be outside or to be in front or in back. In other words, this is a very fundamental work and probably extremely pedestrian in terms of its attempt to discover some of these basic principles. But in other words, we created a whole bunch of these wedges along the wall that would allow somebody graciously, like an architectural promenade that will allow you graciously to get up to the wall and then potentially escape, stay, just watch. We gave no hope. We provided no hope for the future. We just provided a technology that could be both breaking through the wall, leading over the wall, to make this unthinkable notion of the East and West being brought together, and God forbid another Hitler. I mean, that's what America probably worries about, and Russia, America. I mean, it's a very, very tough issue, this wall, because all of it, all our paranoias are embedded in this. So this kind of meandering, let's go through this fast. Now, those were the steps and their development. The zigzag was another thing. The zigzag was that springy piece that provided us with an automatic kind of microcosm of the wall. This was the wall, but now articulated, stable. So an old project of mine occurred where there's a kind of frontispiece and a back piece, and we will go through that now. Next. The frontispiece, seen here in various, when you don't build, you draw a lot. So we draw things over and over again because that's a way of building. That's a way of familiarizing yourself with the object. And it's maybe in some way a kind of frustration, but it's also a way of getting into the object. So we draw a lot. Next. And we build models, very elaborate models that represent some kind of reality, probably not the built one, but some kind of imaginary reality. And we want to feel, we want to sniff the things. We want to be able to walk here in a kind of working class Manchester, environment, looking at these row houses of workers' houses behind the wall, reading angles and all that stuff about the junk in the backyard. Next. And then there's a dark side. There's a side that you don't see quite. That's behind this wall. Next. And that dark side is the kind of Corbusian world. It's another modernist world. So it's the figurative and the formal. The figure and form just divided by the wall. Inside, of course, the wall is taken away, so it's the same space. So it's this play on east and west of figure and form, which is fundamental to architectural thinking. What is the relationship between figure? The house, that's the Passat redone. And this is the original house. And here they are separated, and yet they are the same. It is again this play on form and figure. Next. The inside here, in a poor drawing. Next. The pinwheel. Not much to say about. It has something to do with the interior courtyards in Berlin that has been written beautifully about by Walter Benjamin. And this was a house that was built around a courtyard so that inside it was perfectly static and outside it had all this energy of being thrown. Not so successful. Next. Nice model, but next. The Möbius strip. The Stoa. The Stoa, for me, is one of the most important buildings that were ever made. Its history, its use, is vague. This is the reconstructed, and by one of the nicest things America has done for Greece, is to rebuild this marvelous Stoa. This is, of course, the Agora, and that is the Acropolis. The Panathenaic Way was right here. The ultimate architectural promenade. But the Stoa, that most kind of you don't know what it was used for. I mean, it's clearly just a space where people walk. Next. And it's connected here with the Möbius strip. Walk up and down. Maybe they talked. Maybe they argued. Maybe they drank. Maybe they danced. God knows what they did. But what's so peculiar about it is that it has a fantastic asymmetry. It has a beautiful symmetry here when you're walking, but outside it has a new symmetry that makes the whole thing symmetrical, although one side is a wall. So it's this internal movement, this architectonic possibility that again has to do with this ballistic force of throwing, which throwing here, architectural movement, is important for me. So we wanted to capture this notion of it both being outside and inside. That we wanted to make a building that was confused about being outside and inside. Because ultimately buildings are very abrupt about being either outside and inside. So one of the fundamental things about architecture is its outsideness and its insideness. And it's this insideness that I'm getting very, very upset about. I want to combat that insideness, to try to reflect on its, I mean, it's, the way that it survives is just because there is an outside. So how do you investigate that? I don't know. We did something, but I don't know if it worked. Next. We worked on space that was both inside and outside. Next. Next. And came up with this curious stoa that is quite complicated in many ways. And it's, I think it suffers from its facadeness, but nevertheless it's not far away from where it should be. Next. And it has all kinds of wonderful, these are lousy slides, but there's some wonderful sections. We've been very interested in people like Albers and Mondrian, as it might be quite obvious, in this play between back and front. And that's really what inside and outside is so much about. So we've been trying to bring the back up front and the front out back, and both in all directions, so that you don't quite know whether you're up or down. But this takes too long to try to explain pedantically what it's all about. Anyhow, this is it. Next. 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 Cards. I'm sure that as kids you played with these cards that are divided right down the middle, and you have a bottom part and a top part, and you mix them together, and they make up all kinds of strange people. Anyhow, we found this wonderful building, which is not this one, but a version of this, which was Atatürk's summer palace in Turkey. Atatürk, as you might know, those of you who know world history, was the liberator of Turkey. And he lived in a summer palace that looked like it was designed by Laws, as we say in Deutsch. And we took this because there are lots of Turks in Germany, and them are oppressed like all people are of lesser ethnicity, like Swedes, and nice joke. Not so funny. No, I take that back. It was a stupid joke, and it was not meant to be anything but stupid. Nevertheless, we wanted to make this possibility of having inside this wall, because you don't know what these things are used for, nor do we. Bars, drinking places, obviously not for work. Anyhow, this was the 1 D-mark a night summer palace that anybody could come and rent for a 1 D-mark, but it was always put together and taken apart and put in other places. So we divided the facades into cards, and then we just randomly throw them together to make new buildings. Well, we learned something about this. They almost look exactly like the one we started with. So we had hoped that this kind of chance thing would actually radicalize the form. It didn't. So in some way it's a fundamental failure, because it just looks like the original. It looks just medieval and wonderful. Nevertheless, we made it out of aluminum. Worked on it for 6 months, and it weighed a lot it was very heavy. Next. I'm getting closer here. Next. Next. We etched it, pinned it together, made it possible to make all these new versions. This is the nighttime version. Next. It's about this tall. This is pure craziness, I think. Pure craziness. I mean, mindless in a way, wonderful. Even the wall is made out of aluminum. Next. It is only when you want to abandon yourself to the enterprise. And I have some fantastic kids working with me. They're all under 30, of course. Of course. That committed themselves to this enterprise with a kind of tenacity and madness that these are all etched paper things, put together. Etched, plate etched, and then these are the plates, basically. This guy that worked on this, he always built Bazanka, but he's okay. Next. Next. Bars. These are my favorite places. Favorite things, because they're both bars and bars. You know what I mean? Upon that question, do you have any questions? Germans went to Texas, and they made these wonderful wooden houses that you will find if you go to Texas. Try to avoid the campaign trail because it's full of goop. And instead you will find these wonderful stoic abandoned buildings, because all the new Germans live in wonderful air-conditioned nightmares up the street. The porch, the kind of strange priorpic vertical bar, the open bar, the closed bar, the open bar, the closed bar, the vertical bar. That began the whole struggle of bars. Also drinking bars, also bars where you stand. The metaphor, the connection between metaphor and thinking is terribly important for me. Because it is to deflect the language, to attack, to make the language come around, to serve form and not the other way around. It's a kind of dissimulation of all that stuff. It's not deconstruction. It's much more fundamental. It's what what's his name, Derrida would call grammatology. The question of writing, of architectural writing in the kind of hieroglyphic sense, of something standing up, of something laying down, of something being open, of something being closed. Those fundamental differences that we play with, and then to make them look the same, to make them be the same, to create this ambiguity, which is the modern question, that there's no fact, there's no answer, there's no solution, there is no hope, there is only reality. Next. So in throwing this then, the ballistic force becomes architectonic power, warping, twisting, turning, chopping off, in order to make these objects. They become also kind of rain devices. One of the things that have had tremendous effect on me over the years is something called the Hagen Arena by an Austrian sculptor, architect, painter named Pichler. And it's a terrific kind of device that sticks out of the window and takes the rain through the window over the floor and out again. It describes in a fantastic way the nature of shelter. So the shelteredness then is this rain business, that some rain go this way, some go this, out on this, and when you lift one of the legs like that, and water goes out. It's that kind of descriptive. It is an architectural parlante. It speaks about itself. It tries to reveal itself in its own qualities. It's not about style. It's about ideas. It's about mind over matter. Next. It's about one of those great modernist inventions of the curtain, with the structure in the curtain wall, which I think is absolutely profound, this notion of dividing the skin. So, in fact, the closed system is a structure skinned, and the open system is the structure. But the implication of the skin kind of wears over on the openness. So the glass becomes the skin, and there is a confusion. And I think in this case, the fireplace is whatever. This is not the fireplace. It's probably a bathroom. What do I know? It's too figurative. Nevertheless, it's there. Next. An attempt here to describe this process of the turning, of the twisting, of wanting to do it with your hands, of actually manipulating the form so that I can live through the form by using it. That the form becomes synomorphic with me. That is the dream, ultimately. That architecture becomes the promenade itself, so that I can just sit and drink while it moves in front of you, around you, below you. Next. area their hands, one on top of the other. The throwing of this object that we'll see in the next phase. That's like the pole of the umbrella, pushing into creating all kinds of stuff. It's more clear in the next one. In this particular one, it is a kind of hard open piece. Again, the openness being the strong one, the closeness being the weak one. It's again the opposite of what you normally would think. And that piece gets thrown in, and the roof kind of folds the way that umbrellas do in New York when it rains a lot and it's windy, you know, like this. Oh, fuck, where's my umbrella? What am I going to do? That kind of feeling. Next. The pivots are described because everything is folded around itself. So you can actually read this building. You don't have to go through, Wittkover to read this building if you're curious. It's descriptive. It's right there. It doesn't rely on the past. It relies on itself. It's grown up about its own construction. Next. The pivots are indicated. The water flow, the folding, the wrapping, the power, the strength, the circular doors that you might not see here. It's part of the rotation, because modernist transformation is rotation. Next. Next. Business of throwing. Next. 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 The face, the figure, cast upon form. The past upon the future. Explainable versus the unexplainable. The obvious versus the complex and unrevealed, the hidden. Next. Flying objects of unknown origin. Next. And the chair. To finalize this whole operation, the symbol of this project is sitting. Sitzfleisch, as they say in German. This kind of stuff you have on your behind. Is to actually learn how to sit and to relax. The chair, therefore. It's a wonderful device. It's out of the antidote to American capitalist megalomania. To sit in your ass and don't do anything but have a drink, relax. Don't watch TV. Speculate about good things like architecture. So in here, of course, there's a huge monument to the chair. Nobody can sit in it because it's too large, but you get the idea. Next. We wanted to make a chair. We didn't want to make a chair. Chairs. I mean, chairs are weird because they're so constraining and they hold you, and they're so nice and so friendly because, they always sit there behind you and take care of you, and you look around and they're there, and you sit down and you don't see them. It's very weird. So it's this chairiness, this chair stuff that we were looking for. And we didn't want to invent something new. We wanted to transform things. Next. So we had two chairs we liked. The kind of highbrow, intellectual, blue and red chair by Rietveld, and then a kind of lowbrow, sit on the porch, with your mint julep out there on the East Coast, watching the traffic go by. This was the lowbrow chair and the highbrow chair, and we want to mix them. Yeah, we want to make a truly democratic chair. We want to contaminate one with the other, because ultimately they're alike, sticks and all that stuff. Next. So here's the result. I don't know if you have read Marx, but Karl Marx is an important thinker. And he walked into Hegel's studio and he said, I found Hegel standing on his head. And that's how I did my theory. Well, we wanted to put Rietveld on his shoulder. So we rotated Rietveld. We transformed the Adirondack chair into a plywood skin and wrapped the plywood skin in the rotated Rietveld. And voila, la chaise, the iron duck chair. Next. This is how we did it. Hey, it kills this thing. Well, I told you it's dangerous. Next. There are lots of thoughts here that are probably irrelevant, but the plywood skin cut with a rooter, whatever it's called. The pieces of Rietveld. Next. All the pieces are my pedantic self. I've noted the ones that have been moved a little are red. Next. And here it is put together in 100 chairs. Some kind of great monument to charity. Next. And now let's fly away. Next. Just let it go. Let it go. Don't hesitate. Now, we have come to the end. I really don't know whether it is possible to sustain the life of architecture by looking at its navel. A lot of this work is about naval contemplation. Ultimately, I believe that architecture has to have a social purpose and come out of this forest of the Fahrenheit 451 when you mumble architecture to yourself. And find a new life, a new meaning in the relationship between subject and object. Corbusier was grand. He hoped, he wanted, he desired. We know that it didn't work. We have to have respect for that desire. We have to hope for that desire. Because when it comes back, architecture will again be something beyond the commerce of everyday life. Thank you very much.
Questions? What do you say?
Yes. Yes.
I wonder whether you could expand you said that for architecture, it wouldn't have to, architectural language would have to rise to new high in order to be adequate to the reality. But then you also said that it's good and that it's bad language. Now, in order to find out, in order to write to that reality, does the reality produce the language or does the language produce?
Oh, it's very clear to me that it's the reality that produces the language. It's not the other way around. We really are in a tremendous dilemma. Because the reality, you look at the presidential election, which to me, which is very significant of the kind of tremendous dilemma we're in. That we don't know where we're going. It's all rhetorical. It's all bullshit, basically. And that has direct reflection on what we do as architects. You buy into the latest fad, that you can, and many of these people who buy into the latest fad are marvelous architects. That would be terrific in a situation if there was a real social purpose. But if we took on things like the homeless, Serious. Not just like some effete, snobbish activity, but really dealt with it. Richest country in the world, supposedly, we ain't so much. And dealt with it. Architecture. Hey, we would be maybe one of the greatest nations. The drug problem, all of these things. They have architectural dimension. How do you do a fantastic drug business? For any of you who have been on LSD, amazing. We know that the power of drugs to drive us away. We also know the difficulty of dealing with that, the reality. And how can we as a people put together ourselves and do something? We have notoriously cut off the social dimension when we brought architecture from Europe, architectural ideas from Europe. We just kind of sanitized them. Oh yeah, white architecture, we do a little Richard Meyer job. Hey, we've forgotten this notion that when you get up on that roof in the Corbusier building, you are supposed to see the future. And you can't drain that of architecture because architecture then loses its power. And, I don't know. Architects are just instruments in this process. And the world that we're in has to come to terms with that. And that's when architects, they came running. When all the population in Europe wanted to move to the cities, they came running. Yes, they knew how to put out the old prefabricated, blah, 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 blah. It was already existence minimum, all these ideas of Hilbersheimer and all to make the cities. Yes, it was right there, ready. Architects have the ideas. But society has to produce the inertia. Society has to want it. Because ultimately we are servants of society. And until then we have to wait. Patiently. And mumble architecture. It'll come. Test it. I've talked.